The forensic truth about Billy the Kid. Why America's notorious outlaw remains a scientific ghost. The legend of Billy the Kid, a cornerstone of American frontier mythology, is built on a life of rebellion and a death shrouded in ambiguity. While history has a seemingly straightforward account of his end, the modern desire for absolute scientific proof has transformed his story into one of the nation's most compelling cold cases. The forensic truth about the man-born Henry McCarty is not a story of DNA matches and solved mysteries, but one of tantalizing possibilities, legal barricades, and the stubborn refusal of a 19th century legend to submit to 21st century science. The official end, a shot in the dark. The accepted historical narrative penned by the man who pulled the trigger is both dramatic and definitive. On the moonless night of July 14, 1881, Lincoln County Sheriff Pat Garrett, driven by a $500 bounty and the pressure to end the kid's reign, tracked the 21-year-old fugitive to the ranch of his associate, Pete Maxwell, in Fort Sumner, New Mexico. Garrett, knowing the kid felt safe there, slipped into Maxwell's darkened bedroom to wait. Around midnight, the kid, staying in a nearby guest house, approached the main building, allegedly barefoot and holding a butcher knife, intending to cut a piece of meat hanging on the porch. Noticing Garrett's men posted outside, he backed into Maxwell's unlit room for safety, calling out in Spanish, "Quién es? Who is it? Who is it?" Startled by the armed figure in the darkness, Garrett fired 2 shots from his Colt .44. The first struck Billy in the chest, just above the heart, killing him almost instantly. The second shot went wild, thudding into the wall. The aftermath was swift. A coroner's jury was convened the next morning. Several local residents, including Deluvina Maxwell, a Navajo woman who had been a close friend of the kid, identified the body. The verdict was clear: justifiable homicide. William H. Bonney, alias Billy the Kid, was officially dead. He was buried the next day in the Fort Sumner Military Cemetery, next to his fallen comrades, Tom O'Folliard and Charlie Baudra. For the law and for Pat Garrett, the case was closed. The seeds of doubt, a washed-away grave and competing narratives. For decades, the official account was largely undisputed. However, several crucial factors created fertile ground for skepticism and alternative theories to flourish. The lost grave. The most significant practical problem is the grave itself. The original wooden marker in the Fort Sumner Cemetery was either stolen by souvenir hunters or, more likely, washed away along with many other graves by major floods of the Pecos River in 1889 and 1904. The current tombstone, famously encased in a steel cage to prevent theft, was erected much later and marks only the general area, not the precise burial plot. Without a specific grave site, any exhumation would be a literal shot in the dark. Garrett's motives. Pat Garrett profited from his fame, co-authoring a book, The Authentic Life of Billy the Kid, which cemented his version of events in the public consciousness. While historians largely accept his account, skeptics argue he had a vested financial and reputational interest in ensuring the kid was definitively dead, discouraging questions about whether he might have killed the wrong man in the dark or even allowed the kid to escape. The rise of the imposters. The ambiguity surrounding the kid's fate allowed others to step into the vacuum. The 2 most famous claimants were John Miller, whose claim was made posthumously by his family, and most notably William "Brushy Bill" Roberts of Hico, Texas. In 1949, Brushy Bill, then in his 90s, petitioned the governor of New Mexico for a full pardon, claiming he was the real Billy the Kid. He provided a detailed narrative of his escape and a life lived in hiding. He possessed scars he claimed were from wounds Billy the Kid was known to have sustained. Though Governor Thomas Mabry publicly dismissed him and Brushy Bill died shortly after, his story captivated many and gave the survival theory its most public champion. The forensic age dawns. The 2003 investigation. Fueled by these enduring doubts, a coalition of law enforcement officials from Lincoln County, where Billy was sentenced, and Tobacco County, where he was buried, launched an ambitious investigation in 2003. Their goal was to use modern forensic science to finally answer the question. The plan was scientifically sound and meticulously orchestrated. Step 1. The baseline DNA. The investigation's linchpin was to first exhume the remains of Billy's mother, Catherine Antrim, from her grave in Silver City. By extracting mitochondrial DNA, TNA, which is passed down exclusively from mother to child and survives longer than nuclear DNA, they would create a definitive genetic profile for any maternal relative of Billy the Kid. Step 2. The Fort Sumner exhumation. With the maternal DNA profile in hand, the team would then excavate the area around the kid's tombstone in Fort Sumner to locate and test the remains buried there. A match would prove, once and for all, that the man Garrett killed was indeed Henry McCarty. Step 3. Testing the claimants. The baseline DNA from Catherine Antrim would also be used to test the remains of John Miller and Brushy Bill Roberts, providing a scientific verdict on their claims. The wall of resistance when law and legend collide. The project, which began with a flurry of media attention, collapsed under the weight of legal challenges and local opposition. In Silver City, a distant relative of Catherine Antrim, along with local historians, filed a successful court injunction to block the exhumation of her grave. They argued it was a needless desecration, a publicity stunt that prioritized a historical curiosity over the sanctity of a final resting place. The court agreed, and without the crucial baseline DNA from Billy's mother, the entire scientific premise of the investigation was compromised. In Fort Sumner, the sentiment was equally hostile. The mayor and residents fiercely opposed the idea of their historic cemetery being dug up in what they viewed as a witch hunt. They argued that the historical evidence was sufficient and that the logistical challenge of finding one specific set of remains in a flood-scattered graveyard made the entire effort futile and disrespectful to all those buried there. The 21st century quest for forensic truth was stopped cold by 19th century realities and modern-day legal protections. The investigation was officially shelved, leaving the central questions unanswered. The verdict: a case historically closed, but forensically unsolved. To this day, there has been no definitive forensic conclusion to the story of Billy the Kid. No DNA has ever been tested. Photo analysis experts have conducted comparisons between the single authenticated ferrotype photograph of the kid and photos of Brushy Bill, with most concluding they were not the same person. But this is not the same as genetic proof. The forensic truth about Billy the Kid is that there is no forensic truth. No DNA evidence exists to confirm the identity of the man in the Fort Sumner grave. The precise location of the grave is unknown, making any future attempt at exhumation a near impossible task. The claims of Brushy Bill Roberts and John Miller remain scientifically unproven, existing as compelling folklore rather than historical fact. Historians overwhelmingly stand by the original account. The weight of evidence, the eyewitness identifications, the coroner's report, and the consistency of the narrative from multiple sources at the time is compelling. For them, the case is closed. Yet, the legend endures precisely because of that sliver of doubt, the lack of a body, the lost grave, the whispered possibility of escape. It reveals a modern fascination with challenging accepted histories and a belief that science can and should have the final word. In the case of Billy the Kid, however, science has been silenced, leaving his true fate to be debated not in a lab, but in the unending court of public opinion and myth.